and unsurpassed, penetrating and perfect Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to, remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's teaching.
In Buddhism, when Zen practitioners share their understandings of the teachings and practice, it's offered on the basis of dana paramita. Dana is a Pali word that means generosity or to give freely, and this is done without the expectation of anything in return when the opportunity arises. And those who share the teachings at Great Tree do so on a dana basis, so please support their practice by giving what you can. You can go to greattreetemple.org, hit the support button, and then make a note that your dana is for Genjo, and we will get that over to him. Our speaker this week is Reverend Genjo Williams. Genjo Williams is a student of Reverend Teijo Munnich in the Jikai Dainin Katagiri Roshi lineage of Soto Zen Buddhism. He started his practice in 2011. In 2023, Genjo ordained as a priest, and the following year practiced at Kotaiji and Toshoji Zen training monasteries. Genjo served as shuso, or head of practice, at Great Tree in 2025. Currently, he lives in Asheville, where he works as a counselor and psychotherapist, practices aikido, and continues his practice with Great Tree and the Zen Center of Asheville. The title of his talk today is Karma is This Very Moment. And Genjo-san, I'm a little bit curious. You're speaking for the next few weekends. I'm wondering if these talks are connected at all, or if this is just an isolated subject that you're talking about today.
Yeah, good question. As isolated as it can be, they're not, I haven't strung them
Gotcha.
together like as if it were a series, but I'm sure there will be some connections. Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you read the title because it's good for me to remember what title I chose. You know, the way typically talks are structured at Great Tree is we are asked if we're speaking to choose a title well in advance. And for me, the way I prepare talks and what I'm finding works for me is I just have to kind of speak to my practice at the moment. And so it's difficult for me to choose a topic. And it's good practice for me and stick with it and kind of stay focused on it. But um, the title of this talk this morning, Karma is this very moment. And I'm coming to you from Durham, North Carolina. I've been here for the weekend. I'm at an Airbnb with my mom and my dog, and I'm moving to Durham at the end of the month, and so this is kind of I drove a big U-Haul here. It's a kind of a like preliminary moving some stuff, and um, so that's where I find myself physically at the moment. Um, but yeah, so the title of this talk, Karma is this very moment. It comes from my time at Toshoji, at one of the monasteries that I practiced at in Japan. This one is in Okayama Prefecture, and it's a Zen training monastery. And towards the end of my stay, I left that monastery on the full moon of December, December 15th, 2024. Um, and about a week or so, a little over a week before that, we sat our Rohatsu sesshin. And so this is a sesshin that is very common across Buddhist traditions to sit this first week of December or so, and it's in the spirit of Shakyamuni Buddha sitting under the Bodhi tree and awakening um, on that eighth day of the 12th month. So it's taught. And so this is the spirit of that sesshin. And they're typically pretty intense, lots of sitting, um, lots of silence. And we pretty much sat the whole day for about a week. Yeah, a little over a week. And we would, of course, have meals, and we would go to the ceremony hall, but we wouldn't 3 times a day, as we would normally during a typical day in the monastery for the morning. chanting, lunch chanting, and evening chanting, but we wouldn't chant during those times. We kept the silence. We would just gather in the ceremony hall together after sitting, and do three prostrations and then exit. And so the silence was really held really deep during this time. Um, and the last day of Rohatsu Sesshin, we sat until I think about 1 a.m. or so, and then we went to the ceremony hall and did a released the silence by chanting the Heart Sutra, and then having a I forget the name of the ceremony in Japanese, but for those of y'all who were at the mountain seat ceremony, at the point where Anju-san was on the altar or in front of the altar raised, and people had the opportunity to come up and ask a question and receive an answer. Um, we did a similar type of ceremony at the end of this Rohatsu Sesshin at about, early in the morning. Um, and the Seido Roshi was the person who um, we got to ask the question to and receive an answer, our Seido Roshi. And Seido Roshi is um, an one of the kind of leaders of a monastery. There's typically the head, the abbot or abbess, the docho roshi, and then different other positions and teachers will come and visit and serve in those roles. And so our Seido Roshi was there. And this was Suzuki Roshi, Seido Roshi, who's the son of Shunryu Suzuki Roshi, Hoitsu-san. And so we got to ask a question. So we may form two lines on the two sides of the ceremony hall. Then one person from one side would go up and ask the question and receive the answer, and then we would take turns in that way until everyone had gone. And the question for me that was just very alive in me during the sitting was karma. What is karma? That just it kept coming up. I'd release it and it would come up and I would let it go and it would come back. And so that's what I asked the Seido Roshi is what is karma? And his answer was karma is you and me at this very moment. And it's still very with me. I just even as I was said that just now, I got like kind of a chill go up my body, you know. Um, and he followed it up by he said, just keep sitting zazen. That was his encouragement, you know. And I appreciate that. I think any Buddhist concept or anything, I can at least get super intellectual about it and get really scholarly about it, which I enjoy, and I think there's nothing wrong with that. But I do believe ultimately um, in the benefit of just returning to sitting practice and not trying to understand from an intellectual standpoint, but just sit, as we do, just sit and let go and let whatever comes come and whatever goes everything in its own proper time and place. But ever since then, yeah, I've been kind of sitting with that, or it's called always, it's been very alive with me. It's like, what does that mean? Karma is this very moment. It's you and me here now. Um, and so that's where the title of this talk comes from. And I think anyone who's come to any of my talks before probably knows at this point, I tend to choose topics that I don't know how to talk about, or I haven't quite figured out, or I'm kind of puzzling over, because it's very helpful to um, sit down and really kind of think about it and do some research and get in touch with the sutras and those commentaries, and then to, of course, share and then hear what comes up for people and how other people are understanding these things in their lives. So this is very much in line with that spirit. I don't know what karma is. I don't know how to talk about it. I haven't figured it out. Um, but there's a lot, of course. I mean, it's one of those quintessential tenets of Buddhism. You know, I think I grew up, I don't even know when I first heard about karma, but I think even before even knew that it was comes out of Buddhism, you know, it's just one of those things. You know, there's a store in Asheville where I grew up called Instant Karma. That maybe it was the first time I came across it. Who knows? Um, But yeah, I mean, I think it's for me too, it's so rich because it's also one of those ideas that's not just an idea, you know, it's a real experience. Um, but it's easy. It just, there's so much there, you know, it's like Zen or Buddhism or karma or love or freedom. You know, they're just so much a part of our lexicon, but what do any of those really mean? You know, what really are those? Is that and it's easy for me to dismiss those in a way because it's like, oh yeah, you know, karma, but I think it's been worthwhile to really sit with that and read and listen to what other people have to say about the practice. And there's a lot, you know, there's lots on it. I really encourage you if this is fascinating to you, if you're or if this sparks any interest, so yeah, just do some scholarship on it. There's lots to read. But again, ultimately, I think the best way to understand any of these is to practice them, you know, to put the teachings into your life and really commit yourself to them. Not because that's what the Buddha said, or that's what Dogen Zenji said, or that's what so and so said, but as the best way to learn and to see what it's all about and to see if it's uh, true for you, you know, see if it's what is right for you in this body and mind at this time. And there's lots, you know, there's some pretty you can get really heady with it, but there's also some very concrete teachings about karma. If you do this action, this result will occur. You know, there's some very clear teachings around it. But one thing I did want, and there's so much, you know, I'm like I'm looking down at my notes and it's just like a mess because there's just so much here. It's difficult to find an entry point. But one thing that I will read, and this comes from Dogen Zenji's uh, fascicle of the Shobo Genzo, Jishin Inga. Jishin is can be maybe something like complete faith or complete. It's translated in this translation as absolute certainty, Jishin. And then Inga is the Japanese term for karma. In is like cause, and ga is fruit or result. And in Pali, it's often translated, karma is translated, or kama is translated as action, you know, simply action. But anyway, there's in so Jishin Inga by Dogen Zenji on the absolute certainty of cause and effect. Essentially, he's talking about different um, teachers over the years, Chan teachers and Zen teachers who have talked about karma in different ways. And what he's saying after each one is um, there's no escape from it, essentially. You know, their karma, you know, he kind of challenges, or I use that word challenge, but I mean, in Dogen Zenji style, just directly refutes, you know, some of these teachers who maybe claim to have gone beyond karma, reached a stage where they're no longer um, influenced or no longer um, beholden to the law of karma. And he says, no, you know, there's no, so long as we're here, there's karma, you know, so long as we're in this realm of duality, there's karma, and we're part of that, you know, regardless of how much sitting we do or how, you know, what kind of mind states we achieve. And so there's one passage I want to read from that from Jishin Inga, and this is he's quoting the 19th Indian ancestor Venerable Kumorata, and it goes, "For the time being, we may say that retribution for our good and bad acts has three periods. But in general, worldly people only see a benevolent person coming to an early end, while some violent person is having a long life, or see an evil one enjoying good fortune, while a virtuous one is experiencing calamities. And thereby, worldly people conclude that cause and effect is a dead issue, and that wrong behavior and happiness are devoid of any significance. Such people in particular are ignorant of the fact that shadows and sounds are in accordance with their source, without even a hair's breadth of discrepancy between them. And even with the passing of hundreds of thousands of myriad eons, there is no diminishing of that connection." So there's a lot there we could get into and unpack, but for me, what really sticks out and what I find really fascinating and for me helpful is this. Um, let's see, this idea that there are three periods of time, right? Where karma sometimes it's talked about as karma ripening. You know, there's in my understanding of these three periods is karma that is ripening like immediately. We could go back to like instant karma, you know, something we do something and there's an immediate kind of result connected to that. There's karma that ripens later through a long later on in our life, right? And then there's karma that unfolds and ripens over many lifetimes. And all of these are happening at the same time. Um, and so I think the what makes this really peculiar and fascinating and interesting is that it's not, for me, it's not so clear, direct cause and effect, you know. And I think that teaching around, you know, maybe we see someone who um, is acting unwholesomely or again, there's a lot we can unpack there. They're more explicit oftentimes in the language, like evil people, good people, so and so. But for me, that's it's not so um, black and white. You know, you can't really categorize people in that way. And sometimes even actions, you know, it's again, it's not so clear what is helpful, what's harmful. But I think, yeah, again, it's helpful to think about. I can easily fall into the trap of like, oh well, you know, I see someone maybe acting out their greed or their anger, their hatred. You know, and it's easy to see that in the world stage, you know, or in our daily lives, you know, and in our own minds, you know, and in our own actions. Oh, yeah, acting out of greed, anger, delusion, hatred. But then not seeing any like consequences that we would expect maybe from that. Um, and then vice versa, you know, really, really seeing these acts of generosity, of selflessness, of giving, and then again, not seeing what we would expect to the results to be, but recognizing that um, it's complicated essentially. You know, it's unfolding over many, many in realms and ways. And again, back to that, what Soto Roshi said, it's you and me in this very moment. You know, we're part of this complex web, this interconnected web that I certainly don't know much. I can just say that. You know, I don't really know anything beyond my experience when I really think about it. I have this brilliant brain that we all do that thinks and can hypothesize and make conjectures. But what do I really know about the universe, about what's outside of these four walls, what's in these four walls? This is my first time, third day. technically in this space. I don't know where the story of this furniture. I don't know the stories really of you all in this room. I barely know my own story, and it's constantly changing. Um, and so again, just yeah, recognizing um the complexity there, you know, um, and I think the gift, right? The gift that karma gives us, this because this invitation, many of the teachings go back to there are direct teachings on, well, this unwholesome act creates this effect, or this wholesome act creates this effect. But this gift of playing with that and just seeing, right? I think it connects for me back to the five remembrances. You know, we are of the nature to grow old. There's no escape from that. We are of the nature to become sick. There's no escape from that. We are of the nature to die. There's no escape from that. We are of the nature of everyone and everything we love and hold dear is of the nature to change and disappear. And the fifth is that our only belongings are our actions. It's the ground upon which we stand, right? And can we return to that? Can I return to that? And take accountability for my life and recognize we were talking about this in the mini practice period. We're studying a book called, I think, Boundless Heart by Christine Feldman. And it came up of like expanding our idea of life. It's not my life is not just here, this body and mind, but all beings across all times. All of you in this Zoom room with me are my life. Everything here, this tea, this table, this paper is my life. Um, and I do find um, that my life is, in the biggest picture, in the broadest sense, is always giving me feedback, right? It's always giving me feedback. Um, and it's helpful to pay attention to that, what's happening in the broader context. What are the people around, how are the people around me responding? What is happening? Um, yeah. But again, recognizing the complexity and that we all have our own karma, our own habits, habit energy, our own ideas and values, and our own minds, our own brains, our own bodies. Um, and we're all here now, and I don't know what that means, right? I don't understand what got me here in the bigger sense, like in this body with this mind, born to my parents who were born to their parents who, raised me in Asheville, and now I'm, so and so forever and ever. But I'm here now, right? And that's no small thing, and that helps me to remember that I'm not separate from anybody. It's easy, especially people who are far away from me. We all now with the internet, we all have these parasocial relationships with politicians, with artists, with whomever we do that with, teachers. Um, but it's easy. It can be easy to create for me a sense of separation from that, or see people um, acting out in ways that I don't agree with, and it's easy for me to separate. But recognizing that, oh, I'm here too, with these same seeds, both peace and violence. I'm just as capable as anybody else as spreading peace and acting out of a sense of love and generosity, and acting out of a sense of violence and selfishness and greed. You know, we're all here in it in this soup together. And that's helpful for me too. I think what I come across sometimes with karma that challenges me is using it as a means to separate or ignore. I mean, and we might call it like spiritual bypassing, this kind of, well, that's their karma. That doesn't have anything to do with me. You reap what you sow, that whole thing. And of course it's true and it's not true. It's also like, yeah, and I'm here too. I'm a part of that. And so I'm witnessing it. I'm not a I don't none of us exist in a vacuum. I'm not separate from the world around me, the people around me, the suffering around me. And the fact that I'm here witnessing and a part of is meaningful, you know, for me. And the question is, okay, well, what do I do then with my body and mind to lessen the suffering in the world and promote more um, good vibes, to promote more freedom, more agency, for folks. Um, and so I wanted to just kind of wrap up before we open it up into like a discussion. Just like a guided, not even maybe a meditation, but like a thought experiment, even it might be. But but yeah, so just take a moment to kind of recognize where you are in the very, very physical, tangible sense. You know, I'm here in Durham, West Durham, in this chair, at this table, with this laptop, you know, and do that for yourself. And then think about all the actions that you took to get here in this moment. All start really small. I opened my laptop, I cut on Zoom, you know, I sat in this chair, I moved it from across the way. And then recognize maybe bigger, okay, well what are the bigger things at play here? Or maybe the underneath things, you know, our commitments, our values, our aspirations. But then also thinking about beyond us in a way, not separate from us, but beyond us. Parents' aspirations, their circumstances, what choices they had and made, great grandparents, great grandparents. But then also thinking about the world and the people around us, the technology that allows us to be here. How did that happen? What were all the choices and conditions that had to come together for that to be realized? The tea in my cup, you know, everything, the robes on my body, the hair on my head. That's usually not here. Um, yeah, the candle next to my laptop, the room I'm in, the folks who built this room, and the people who furnished it. The quiet I can hear because my mom chose to take Kiku out to the river while I do this talk. But then also the noise, their clothes in the dryer. How did that dryer get to be here? Both physically in this space, but then how did it come to be? Who had the idea and how did all of that come together? For me, I think that's what, in this moment at least, this is my thinking that that's what Seido Roshi was pointing me to. There's an infinite amount of causes and conditions of choices and circumstances that arose and are constantly arising for us to be right here, right now. And I have my role to play. I'm responsible for my life and my actions. And I'm also here now in this web. There's a lot I'm not responsible for. And the big question for me is what am I responsible for and what is not my responsibility? I don't have a clear answer. You know, one of my I'm thinking of parasocial relationships. It's not parasocial anymore. We've met a few times and chatted. But I definitely, well, who knows? But my thinking is that I've built up more of our relationship than this other person has. This is a teacher, Lama Rod Owens. I've gotten to sit retreat with, and I consider him a really important teacher for me. Um, but one of the things he says that I love, I think it's so simple and to the point, is he comes back to we do our work so we don't become work for other people. You know, again, the question there is what is our work to do, right? But I think that's for me an important question to ask myself, you know, both for a practical, what can I do? What am I responsible for? But then also, I know for me, I can have a tendency to try to do work that's not mine to do, and one, that just drains me out, and it doesn't actually get the work done because I can't, it's not mine to do. And that gets in the way of actually doing the work that is mine to do, rather than trusting and allowing other people to do their work, and supporting all, Sangha practice, supporting everyone and each other in our work, but asking for help when we need it and offering what we can. But um, yeah, not taking on what's not ours and choosing to take on what is ours, taking responsibility. You know, it came up a few weeks ago in our practice period, this idea of compassion, boundless compassion and compassion fatigue. And so for me, there's something there too, connected to what are we saying yes to? What is our work and what's not? How are we receiving support and offering support? So anyway, I think I will stop there, and just open it up for anything that anyone would like to share. Thanks for being here and for listening.
Your thought experiment immediately made me think of this quote from the astrophysicist Carl Sagan, which is like, in order to create an apple pie from scratch, first you must invent the whole universe. And it just, yeah, it's like even just showing up here today, it's like, yeah, I got in my car and I woke up early, but the whole universe was created to get me here today. And it just, I feel like karma, when I was first introduced to it from a more like Western perspective, it was largely things will happen. If I do bad things will happen. But I find a better understanding now in just thinking like, yeah, it is how we are here right now. It is everything that has led to this moment. And it doesn't really dictate what will happen next in that direct, clear way, but it has completely decided where we are right now. Um, yeah, that's what I have to say.
Thank you. Thanks, Joe. Yeah, I really like all of that. I like that too. It makes me think too, like there is no next, ultimately. There's only ever now, you know, and what we do right now. But my readings on karma also brought me to she's a theoretical physicist, Chanda Prescott Weinstein. She's written a few books. I was reading her book, The Disordered Cosmos. And I got through like the first chapter, and then I was like, okay, this is above my head. I need to read this in a group with the physicists so they can explain what's happening to me. And she did a really wonderful job of breaking things down, but it was still like that's not my karma right now to understand what she's saying. But one thing that stuck out, and I'm probably very much misunderstanding this, is she talked about these four kind of fundamental forces in the universe, and I know there's a physicist in the room, so check me on this. But there's these four fundamental forces, and one of them is gravity, but then gravity doesn't fit into this like standard model of the universe. And that was really curious and fascinating to me because I had just also been reading this book on kind of basic Buddhism, and it was talking about comparing karma to gravity, and like you were saying, Joe, there's no good or bad gravity. It's just gravity. It's just this force that we're in the midst of. Um, but how, what I thought was like, oh, but what is gravity? Like, do we really actually I don't certain for sure understand what gravity is, but does anybody? Do these physicists who, have been studying it for years, and same with karma, not good or bad, just is. And does anybody really know what it is? Does it matter? I don't know. Yeah. How'd I do, Quinn? That makes sense.
Checks out.
Okay.
All checks out.
Okay, cool.
Good morning, Genjo. Thank you so much for your talk. You articulated so beautifully a lot of the ways that I am also really unsure of what karma is and unclear how it works, which is probably don't need clarity. But one of the questions I was wondering, we do in different translations a kind of repentance verse in Zen. And in English, there are so many different ways of translating it, but to me, it seems, all of the harmful karma ever committed by me, I repent in one way or another. And I was wondering if you could tell me what that means to you now for your practice. Because it seems that for me, with a Christian inheritance, the inclination is to almost put a kind of sin and confession pattern onto it, but I just don't think that's the practice in Zen. So I was wondering if you had any thoughts on how you approach confession or repentance or that kind of practice of taking on your own karma.
Yeah, good question. I think what it boils down to for me is just taking responsibility for my life, you know, um, and taking accountability for my actions, not in a judgmental way, no, not in a, oh, I committed a sin, or even, I did some harm, some, some perceived harm, you know, I'm going to be, struck down or go to hell or whatever it is. It's just really, I think I just come home to, oh, I did that. I did that. That happened. I did that. This is a response, and kind of letting go of the rest, but then also, but like in that letting go, like not resisting any consequences that come out of that, you know, um, kind of letting go of resistance, letting go of not of avoiding what I've done. If there's something that I've done that I, wish I hadn't, or I regret, or I'm not proud of, but kind of standing 10 toes down in my life, and looking at myself clearly, and letting whatever happens after that happen without trying to avoid. I know for me, like, um, I can like almost like try to reject my karma by making up excuses for myself, rather than just if people are do something and it pisses people off, rather than try to justify or, explain myself, which maybe there's a time for that. I'm not sure. I'm kind of at this point where it's like, just let people be pissed, if they're pissed, and let people be free to have their experience. And, and just kind of sit firmly in what I've done, and my intention. right? I don't have to convince when I'm doing, I don't have to convince anyone of anything or prove anything. I think that's what the teachings too. We're already awakened. We're already free. We're already, worthy of all the love in the universe. There's no conditions on that. So there's nothing to prove, if I do something that creates some kind of negative response, it's okay. Just accept that and receive the consequences and let it go, you know, and kind of don't get stuck in, I think, adding on the layers of, oh, I'm a bad person, or, I'm again, like I've fallen out of favor with whomever, whatever entity or whatever people, you know. That's what I keep coming back to. That's what came up for me, Daisho. Thanks for your question, and we would chant that verse every day in the monastery. And I chant it, and I don't chant it every day still, but I come back to it regularly. Because I think there's something there too, like I don't know. I think our experience really changes when we make that commitment. I'm thinking about living by vow, not by karma, but when we make that commitment to be responsible for our lives and don't outsource our happiness or fall into this trap of being victimized by life and being kind of helpless and powerless, but taking responsibility. Uh,
It's so helpful. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Genjo, Mary here. Thank you so much for your talk. I identify with a lot of what you were saying, and issue in particular is this doing other people's work, which I think you've been speaking to in your responses in other ways. How do you identify when it's getting hooked by that and getting pulled away from living by vow towards, for me, been socialized to be a caregiver from a very early age. And so that pull to do other people's work is a well-worn groove.
mm.
And I learned to pull back a little bit and look at what I'm doing and why. But I wondered if you could speak more to how you catch it. How do you identify oh, I'm getting hooked, and how you practice with, or
Mhm.
if that is even what you do.
Yeah, yeah, it is. I try. Yeah, I don't, it's hard for me. It's difficult. Yeah, I find it's a difficult practice to know, and right, because I think too, there's also like not going to the other extreme with that too, of like pulling back and being like completely like, well, you know, you're on your own, right? But still being present and engaged in this kind of, for me, trying to be a supportive and compassionate presence in people's lives, not a cold, kind of withdrawn, separate entity. Um, but yeah, at the same time, not like you were saying, oh, going too far the other way, you know. And I've noticed too that I mean there's a physicality there. I mean, we say pull back and lean in for a reason. Like I find that I do that, almost unconsciously. And so trying to bring that into conscious awareness when I am, oh, I'm really leaned in to this person or this situation. Is that where I need to be? And just like I think for me, like trying to be aware of that and having some curiosity around it. Maybe it is, or maybe it's like, oh, actually, I need to kind of sit back into myself and let them be over there a little bit. Or actually, I do need to, it's almost like I need to pull back so that they can actually lean in a little bit. And there is a physicality there I notice in my own life. I'm thinking particularly with therapy and there's this therapeutic relationships are such a rich practice ground for for this stuff, you know. But then also emotionally, energetically, that can be happening too. And I think letting go of like, again, not good or bad, but just noticing and gaining awareness. And kind of, I think for me, it's helpful to just kind of name what's happening in the moment and see it, you know. Oh, I'm noticing I'm maybe, yeah, like doing or, t picking up something that's not mine to pick up or, and there's so much there for me too. I mean, there's like, yeah, my own social conditioning that, I mean, goes, we're talking intergenerational, right? There's racial dynamics, there's gender dynamics, there are dynamics. It's just dynamics out the wazoo. There's, yeah, being in this Judeo-Christian environment, growing up in the Bible Belt, there's saviorism, there's all these things, all these things. But I think, again, coming back to like Zazen in a way, like when we're sitting on our cushion, in my experience, when I'm noticing I'm really hooked by a thought, I'm usually rigid and tight and my thumbs are really pressed up against each other. My shoulders are hunched. My burrows are frowed, you know. Or when I'm really just like kind of, just kind of dulled out. I'm like, overly detached, and coming back to, okay, like come back to my center, come back to my gut, to my body, and letting it go from there. Not to say that that's the final answer necessarily, but I think for me, a place to return to kind of start to regather and recenter myself and kind of have an idea of yeah, how I need to energetically or physically or mentally, emotionally position myself in any given situation. And, you know, it's slow work too. And I think again, it's what the Dalai Lama says, the most important thing we can do in our lives is have a practice for um, self-reflection and self-correction. Because in the moment, we can go on autopilot, right? Um, so they're coming back to our practice, and ideally, over time, I think the practice is to bring our practice off the cushion with us and bring that kind of awareness that we cultivate, so that we're not getting hooked so subconsciously, as much as possible. I don't know that, at least in this body and mind, if there's any way, so long as I'm conscious, I'll be unconscious in some ways. But I don't know. I'll stop there because I feel like I'm just could go
That
rambling
was
on.
helpful though. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's a great question and not anything that I have figured out. I can't
Genjo,
tell if
I have a, oh,
Steve.
sorry.
That's okay. Is that Steve in the room? You had raised your hand.
Yeah, this is Steve. Is it all right if I comment on the last question? That's something that I've been really working on over the past couple of years. When I'm around, especially my family of origin, people that I want to do their work or change, what's been helpful to me is the mindfulness of my own suffering and being with that as the starting point, and then being mindful of their suffering and using that as my practice. And that's been helping a lot, because there's a lot of I'm suffering deeply watching my family members live in a way that is creating a lot of suffering for themselves. And by getting involved, I am in a way participating, by trying to take it away in a way or distract from it and like allowing it, but allowing myself to open to the feeling of the suffering, has been very helpful to slow down around them
Hmm.
and allow it.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Yeah. Family is what's another great place to practice. Yeah, yeah, right. I think that's such a beautiful and powerful practice, to see the patterns, to see the kind of samsara playing itself out, but then see it and say, well, okay, I'm personally not going to participate in that. you know, if you want to, you can. Not that you're saying this out loud, but internally of like, okay, I read something recently. It was like, we have to let people be free to keep their patterns if that's what they want to do. But I think just kind of choosing something else for ourselves can even just show other people that there's another way of being, Not that that's the point, Um, some point is just to let people be free. Can't force people into freedom because that's not freedom, but and these patterns, our behavior is what we do. Our mental formations exist for a reason, and to take those away or to challenge those it can be very disruptive for people. And so yeah, so anyway, Steve, yeah, I love that stance of just kind of opening to your own experience and noticing that tendency to, that natural tendency, I want you to be free. I want you to be free from suffering. And that's up to you, ultimately. That's up to each of us to make that choice for ourselves. Yeah. Okay, someone else had started to speak. I'm sorry, you got I'm not sure who that was. I heard a voice. Oh, see a message in the chat. What a powerful thought experiment, the interconnectedness of us all, past, present, and future. Thanks, Genjo. I, yeah, thank you, Linda. Thank you for sharing.
Okay, if there are no other comments or questions, I'll make some announcements and then we can give back the merit. For this upcoming week, nothing too much happening this week, except for some evening meditations on Thursdays, just for some newer people who are in the room. I also wanted to mention, like as I said before, Genjo is going to be speaking next Saturday as well, and the title of his talk is Deep Listening for next week. And that's it.
Okay. We broke up for a second, Jogyo. Did you mention we're gonna watch The Matrix next
I forgot. When
next
did you
Saturday?
decide on that?
Yeah, the 11th, Saturday the
Okay,
11th. So we'll
got you.
we'll we'll have two periods of Zazen. So like just like we do 6 to 7:30, we'll have Kinhin in the middle. And that the first Matrix, to be clear. Um and yeah, we'll just watch it and see. We've been wanting to watch it for a while. That's just going to be in person because I think I'm just thinking about bandwidth. I don't know if that will really translate, but yeah, so that's next Saturday. So yeah, come sit beforehand if you'd like. But the movie will start we'll start it a little bit after 7:30. There's a tea place here in Raleigh called Tin Roof. I think Tin Roof Teas. Really great selection of different teas and tea paraphernalia, and they make this Morpheus blend of tea from the Matrix. So we'll have some of that, and please bring anything you'd like to bring. Yeah. Thanks.
And
Thanks,
maybe
everyone.
email me if you want to come, just so we can get a head count for snacks and stuff. My
Oh
email
yeah.
is info@greattreetemple.org if you want to come to the Matrix. Just let me know.
If you want to come to the Matrix.
If you want to be in the Matrix, just let me know.
Or come out of the Matrix, maybe. Okay, we'll give back the merit. May the merit of this practice
May the merit of this practice
benefit all beings
benefit all beings
and bring peace.
and bring peace.
Okay, take care. Stay cool.
Thanks, Genjo. Thank you, everybody.